Hi, I'm Salman Cagliano, Associate Professor of History at Campbell University in North Carolina, former merchant mariner. I teach a course in maritime industry policy for the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. Welcome to this episode of What's Going On in the Suez, April 19th. Well, not a lot going on in the Suez today, I have to say. News seems pretty slow. Everything has not changed dramatically. Let's go to our favorite ship. There she is. Ever Given is still anchored in the Great Bitter Lake. No movement as of yet. Everything kind of stays the same. The Egyptians are demanding $916 million before they release the ship and cargo. They did release 2 of the crew members a few days ago to go home, leaving 23 on board. The American Bureau of Shipping has come on board, inspected the hull, given them certification to sail the vessel up to Port Said. That's the northern part of the canal up here. The question is, what happens? The company, Evergreen, is trying to split the cargo from the ship, maybe have the Egyptians hold the cargo and allow the ship to go. The ship's going to need repairs before it can return back to service because of the flooding that was sustained up forward. They really want to get this ship back in the service. She's one of 11 big vessels in the Golden class. Obviously, her not being on a route impacts Evergreen a lot. They need the capacity of the vessel in moving cargo. Obviously, the people on board want the cargo coming off. We're getting more reports of what's on board Evergreen. I had one person tell me of a descriptive element of what's on the vessel. I will not share it with you because I don't want to go into details. It was sex related. But anyway, we know of gnomes being stuck on board. That people in England don't have access to their garden gnomes, which again is okay. But more importantly, it's a disruption of the global trade. And that's what we're seeing to continue here. I also have to say that I am really puzzled and wondering what the major container firms are thinking about this. Beyond Evergreen, what is Maersk? What is 2M? What is Costco? What is CMA? Hapag-Lloyd? What are they all, ONE, what are they all thinking about this? Because if this can happen to them, to Evergreen, it can happen to them. And they're not going to be happy being extorted by the Egyptians in this way. Because while they agree there's probably money that needs to be paid to the Egyptians, the $300 million that the Egyptians listed for disrespecting the canal, that's not going to fly with a lot of these. So I'm sure there's a lot of behind the scenes work that's being done here. We'll have to wait and see. In other news falling out from this, there's a story on G-Captain. Fitch says shipping rates rally has peaked. Fitch Ratings, which does a lot of these ratings for supplies and shipping, basically are saying, listen, we're going to reach a peak here fairly soon, that they don't expect this increase to be sustainable for long, the high rates, the demand, that it's eventually going to fall. They specifically highlight the correction that took place when the market crashed in 2000, 2009. If you go back and look at 2008, 2009, that's when world shipping actually declined, including the number of containers moving around the planet. And they're kind of looking at that and saying, yeah, this is on the prospect, this may be happening. On the flip side of that, but I have to tell you that there's a lot of contradictory information out here. So this is a report out by FreightWaves, American shipper, where they highlight John McCowan's report. John McCowan, I know very well. He does a report on container shipping, particularly in the United States. And one of the things he's showing is the absolute just change in monthly container imports, a massive spike in March, just up. I think he's got just shy of 70% increase as to what it's been. If you look at this chart here, container increases have been fairly, small, modest, kind of flattened out in 2019. End of 2019 into 2020, you get that negative dip because of COVID. But then all of a sudden in early 2020, right here in August of 2020, you basically flatline back to normal. And then all of a sudden it just peaks, and then it just takes off. And so John McCowan is reporting this. He's looking at changes. Volumes rose most in Los Angeles by 48%. Long Beach, 44.5%. Savannah, which is a port on the East Coast, which is taking advantage of the new lane of the Panama Canal, is up 32.8%. Seattle, Tacoma is up 32.2%. And so we're seeing this increase in imports, and probably one of the biggest significant things is the widening between the import-export gap. A lot more imports are sitting on the docks, not able to get out, versus exports. This was in the Port of Los Angeles quarterly report that just came out, whereas the number of containers are increasing dramatically. I mean, just a huge increase. The number of imports is holding fairly steady. And actually, there's more empty containers going out than imports. And the reason you would ask is, well, why are you sending empty containers and not exports out of the United States? Is because the shipping lines determine what goes on their vessels. And empty containers can be recycled a lot faster. You can send them right to producers to load and send back. A cargo full of U.S. exports has to be landed, has to be then sent to where the cargo needs to be exported. It needs to be offloaded. The container needs to be delivered back and then sent. It's just a longer lead time with containers. It's one of the reasons why I talked about that story of Hapag-Lloyd building more containers was so significant. So this story here, and again, I'll have the links to all these in the show notes, so please take time to take a look at them. But John McCowan, you can register for his newsletter. I do. It really shows you how trade has been increasing here, particularly on the container side. John does a fantastic job in looking at this. And then there's a Splash 247 story by Sam Chambers, which talks about the fact that North America, us, Americans, Sam's blaming us for being responsible for the world's container shortage, and which is fairly true because we can't get our empties back out. We can't get our containers back out. And we've got a huge imbalance here. He talks about this. Before the pandemic, North America was structurally responsible for 40 to 45% of the empty imbalance needed in Asia. Fast forward, North America is now structurally responsible for 55 to 60% of the imbalance. Wow, we're being blamed for this. And it's appropriate, we are. We just are not being able to turn around containers a lot. One of the interesting things that the Port of LA talked about in their discussion, which I found really interesting, these quarterly reports. One of the things shipping lines and ports do are these quarterly reports, and more of them are doing them online now, so it's great to see. Used to be you had to attend them, but now you can just virtually see them. Is the Port of LA really faces a challenge. John Conrad and I talked about this in this week's G-Captain. Apologize, been teaching class all morning, so a little dry mouth here. The Port of LA has to offload a larger percentage of the volume of ships than most other ports do. So when a ship, for example, when Ever Given goes to Europe, it goes to Felixstowe, it goes to Rotterdam, it goes to Hamburg, and actually stops again back in Rotterdam. When ships come to the United States, they go to LA Long Beach, and sometimes that's it. Sometimes they have to offload the entire ship, or maybe they'll go to LA Long Beach and then up to San Francisco, Oakland offload, or maybe Seattle, Tacoma, but maybe just one other port. So the larger percentage of cargo has to come off the vessels in LA Long Beach because that's where the people are. You can offload them in Seattle, Tacoma, and San Francisco, Oakland, but if the cargo is going to go back down to LA and Oakland, then you're just paying additional handling charges. So one of the things we're seeing here is this offset. This is also having an impact for higher rates for vessels. The Baltic Dry Index. The Baltic Index really is the gauge for charter rates for vessels. They do oil, container, and this dry index refers to bulkers. These are the vessels that carry grain or ore. And one of the things we're seeing is the Baltic Dry Index is at really a peak, 1.5 year peak, which is amazing. If you watch that Baltic Index over time, you'll see it's usually a good indicator for where the economy is going. When the Baltic Index drops, that means we're about ready to slow down usually. But here, the dry index here, the bulk index in particular, is booming. It has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of the nations that import bulk, China, India, other countries, need these supplies. And we're seeing them shipped in large numbers. Other thing, just some other news to let you know about. We've talked about fuel for vessels. And one of the things that's interesting here is the World Bank is recommending against LNG for decarbonization as a fuel source for vessels. LNG was initially adopted as one of these fuel sources, which was thought to be a great one to decarbonize. The problem with LNG is you need to carry these large tanks of LNG, and you can't carry enough to fuel the vessel entirely. The concept was you would use LNG in coastal waters and ports. While shipping is the smallest polluter per ton of cargo, if you compare it to trucks and rail and any other methods, the shipping is the best. It's obviously the least amount of pollution for a ton of cargo. The problem is ships carry 200,000 tons of cargo, and you just have these huge plumes that come out. If you look at the port of LA, Long Beach, or any of these large ports, Singapore, Dubai, Rotterdam, Port Said, Algeciras, all these have these massive plumes of pollution right over them caused by the vessels. So LNG was initially adapted, but now the World Bank is saying this may not be the way forward. Which, okay, what do I care what a bank tells me about decarbonization? Well, if you need to fund your vessel, if you need to get loans, World Bank is one of the places you want to go. And if the World Bank is telling you, don't invest in this, that means they're not going to invest in you. The other side I want to show you, and again, I want to highlight some stuff that perhaps you don't get access to. This is a great one. This is one I write for a lot, and I read, and I participate in a lot. This is CIMSEC, the Center for International Maritime Security. If there are threats or dangers in the world, CIMSEC covers them. Yeah, they do a lot of military, but they also have been doing a lot of commercial. Right now, today's the last day of their infrastructure and trade essay contest. Remember, I got to head off from here and finish writing my submission. They do these great write-ups. So for example, here in the ocean governance section, worldwide ocean governance protecting the most vulnerable assets, ports and harbors. They do fishing, wildlife, you name it. I think it's a really great site and a great group. I recommend it strongly. They do a podcast called Sea Control. I linked it into my talk the other day on it regarding Ever Given, but they do some great topical ones if you're really interested in some really diverse topics. They got one on Sea Shepherd, for example, the entity that goes out there and fights illegal fishing and whaling, IUU, illegal unreported and under, I forget what the IUU stands for, I apologize, it's blanking on me all of a sudden, but basically illegal fishing, they're out there. So again, a wide variety of topics. Great little group. Again, if you're interested in this, very diverse population. They have chapters around the world. Just a great group. And again, their podcasts are great. They do the podcast, the Sea Control podcast, and then they do another podcast, the Bilge Pumps, which are three very unique individuals, 2 English, 1 Australian. I've been on that one a few times too. And they just go off on their tangents. One's a naval historian, one's a journalist. The other one does a great website on the history of ships in the age of steam and propulsion, modern propulsion. Just great. So recommend the site. Last story I want to add is a strange story that came up. I saw this on Splash 247, but I thought it's really interesting. Dead crew member with COVID washes up on Vanuatu shores, sparks lockdown. Haven't seen a lot of stories about crews getting COVID, but I saw a report from someone emailed me earlier today about one, a Greek vessel in the Mediterranean. Here's one in the Far East. Actually, excuse me, in the Pacific. Vanuatu is in South Pacific. Very interesting stories about this. The crewman washed ashore, which means the fell off, threw off. We don't know yet what happened here, but you don't want COVID outbreak on these small vessels because it runs rampant, and more importantly, they will not allow entry of the vessels in the ports if you have COVID on board. So we're seeing that begin to happen here in some of these ships. Going to start following this story a bit. I think it's going to be interesting to see. Last story I'll share with you is this one. Myself and Sashi Kumar. Sashi Kumar was the provost at Maine Maritime Academy, one of the 6 maritime academies in the United States. He was provost at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, and now is a deputy administrator, I think he's deputy administrator, at the Maritime Administration in the United States. If you think I know anything about the maritime industry, I know a fraction of what Sashi knows. We need to harness Sashi's brain and save it for humanity because he knows this stuff better than anybody else. He and I were, I think I said that right, he and I were asked to jointly write. First time I've ever done this, by the way. I've never written an article with a co-author. And it was great. It was fantastic. Sashi and I worked very well together. Wrote this piece on the alchemy of the Ever Given. I basically wrote the first half, writing about the events leading up to the grounding and the salvage, and then Sashi Kumar, Dr. Kumar, wrote about the impact on global trade, and I'll have a link to this. We were asked by the Naval Institute Proceedings to put this together. Sashi does their Merchant Marine in Review in the May issue of Proceedings, so that's going to be coming out here fairly soon. But it was very nice to be asked to do this. So I was happy to do it, and I'll have the link for it in the show notes. So that's it. Quiet so far in the Suez today. A lot of other stuff going on around the world. Please, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel. Also, be sure to hit the bell so you'll get warnings of new videos. We'll have, again, updates on what's going on in the Suez fairly daily. We will also have a special later in the week, hopefully Wednesday, but Wednesday or Thursday is when I try to get those out for you on maritime trade. Working on a project right now on that. I'm still finishing it up, so I don't want to say what it is yet. Also, going over the G Captain, John Conrad and I posted a weekly summary of last week's news to start your week off, a good little primer on what's going on this week and other issues beyond Ever Given. So thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. Always appreciate the comments and the ideas. Get a lot of great positive feedback from everybody. So it's nice to hear. So thanks, and see you soon.